What's up, everybody? Welcome back. So this will be my second episode of my beginner course, and in this episode I'm going to be teaching debounces and checks. So first of all, what is a debounce? So many games use debounces as cooldown systems, anti-cheats, things like that, and they're really helpful. Even advanced scripters use debounces, obviously. I mean, it's a system, so why wouldn't you use it? So, first of all, the last episode we learned variables and functions, and this is what we're going to use to create our debounce system. So, the first thing we're going to start off with is a local variable, and we're going to say time to wait. So basically, this is the cooldown, or a better name for it would be cooldown. This will be the cooldown for our debounce. And this will be our function to call for the debounce. So we'll just say local debounce function. And so this is kind of similar to what I was teaching about variables and functions, how there are different ways you can write it. One thing I would recommend is always using things like function debounce function. And that's mainly because a local function is something you want to use inside of other functions, but you're free to use it outside of functions as well. So inside the debounce function, we're going to actually make sure that whoever's calling the function has the cooldown. So right now we're not going to need to do that for this example, but in the future when you learn more about remote events and things like that, it'll become very useful. So for right now, we'll just say local has been debounced. So we'll set this to false, meaning that this has not been triggered yet. And this is where checks come into play. So a check, or otherwise known as a guard clause, will prevent you from nesting. So what nesting is basically if you had all these if statements jumbled up together, it becomes very unreadable. This is not what you want as a scripter. Rather, what you want is you want a clean and less jumbled up code, such as this. Most people, what they do is they put everything on the same line. I mean, that's just how I code. So what you want is, we're going to say that if we've already been debounced, which, if you notice, if you just say if has been debounced, this will count for if the boolean is actually true. So because it's false, this will not run, and we don't want it to run if it's returning nothing. This, what return does is either it'll return a value and it'll stop the function. So basically, we'll just say if we've been debounced, then we just return that, meaning that you cannot call this function. And from here, we will just wait for the cooldown to play, and then we'll say that we have not been debounced after that. So, of course, we have the cooldown, we have the has been debounced variable, and we have the debounce function. So if the debounce function has been changed to true, then we'll stop the function from running. But if it has not been set to true, then it'll continue on to the next lines. These next lines set a cooldown, which also I forgot to set this to true. What you want to do is you want to set this to true, because if you try to run this again, then you'll see we've already been debounced. So now one problem with this is using task.wait. You can't call this function because it's on the same thread. So basically, there's really no need for a debounce if you're saying task.wait. But one way you can do it is say task.delay. And what this does is it'll run on a different thread, and it'll just wait that amount of seconds and then run the function while you're able to call this, or while you're able to do lines right here without having to wait 2 seconds or the cooldown. So basically, instead of waiting 2 seconds, we wait 2 seconds inside of this function and that'll stop this. So if I said print high, if I waited 2 seconds right here, it'll wait 2 seconds for this to run, and then it'll print high. But if I use delay, then it will wait 2 seconds, but this will run immediately after I call this function. So if I said print high, or if we said print by right here, if I said print high and I ran the debounce function, it'll run and it'll say high, by. So as you can see. But then right here, if I run this again, you'll notice it only says by once. So now if we take the cooldown, so we just say task.wait cooldown, and then we did a debounce function right here, you'll see if we run it, after 2 seconds it'll say bye again because it waited for this cooldown until the debounce has been set back to false. So I'll go over this again. If this debounce is true, which we set it right here, then it will stop the function from running entirely. We'll just stop it right there, and this won't run. But then, if this is false, then it'll not do this return statement, and instead it'll carry on with this system, which then sets this true, so this cannot be called again. And another way we can actually represent it is using a warn right here to say, you cannot call this function yet. Meaning, oh, this debounce is true, then we'll just stop the player and tell the player that you can't run the function yet. Which unfortunately I did this while I was in playtesting, so it might not save. Okay, never mind, it did. Yeah, by the way guys, make sure you check that if you're playtesting or not whenever you modify code. I've fallen into a lot of traps by doing that. But now you'll see if I run it, then it says hi, bye. But then if I call this function one more time, it'll warn out saying that I cannot call this function yet. And then of course after I wait the 2 seconds out right here and then call it again, it'll be ready to say bye. So that was a very simple system that I tried to explain to the best of my abilities. And now let's try to create something out of it. So instead now we'll have a debounce function. So we'll just say local function create debounce. So this debounce will have a variable, of course. So we'll say the time to wait, or we'll just say cooldown as the first variable, and then the function. And also, you don't want to use function as a variable name because, as you can see, it'll highlight red and it'll have a syntax error. That's because this is already a variable right here, or this is already defined. So now we'll have the cooldown and the func, of course. So right here, we'll just save the cooldown. So local new debounce equals create debounce for 2 seconds, and then after that 2 seconds, we'll send in a function right here to just print out hi. So local high debounce. So right here we'll create a brand new table, and this table will have the data that we'll use, so the cooldown and the function. And of course, whenever we say like high debounce and we call it, so what you'll notice is that I return a function, and when this function is ran, it'll check to see if our check is true. So we'll just say has debounce equals false. We'll put it in this table. So this table will be defined as a dictionary. We'll have the cooldown data in here, the debounce data, and the function data. And right here we'll just say that if the table has a debounce, then return, meaning that, oh, this has already been called prior, so we'll not do anything with it. And then of course we have to set the debounce to true, meaning that we've called the function. And then we'll delay, and we'll then say table.hasDebounce equals false. So right here, this is where you want to call your function. So you might be wondering why I use a table. Originally I was going to return the table, but I decided that returning tables or new table methods might be a little bit too complex for newer scripters. So right here we'll just return a function. So returning a blank function with no variable name, which you don't really need a variable name if you're returning something, is not really a point unless it's a variable like right here, like local a is 50 and you're returning a. Instead you can just return the function, or you can return 50, but that's not what we're doing right now. When we return this function, that's something you can call right here, of course, and if we call the hi debounce twice, you'll see where it only prints out hi once. But then if we wait 2 seconds, then we can call hi debounce one more time, and you'll see it prints out hi right here, and then after 2 seconds, it prints hi again. So now that you understand the basics of debounces, comment down below exactly what you learned from here, and even comment some projects that you made using this. Goodbye.